The room held its breath. Amara lay frozen beneath silk sheets that suddenly felt like burial shrouds. The darkness pressed against her skin, heavy and absolute. Rain tapped against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Seoul penthouse, each droplet marking time she wished she could stop. His breathing had steadied moments ago. Rhythmic. The breathing of a man descending into dreams. Then his lips parted. One word. One name. Zara. Her sister's name. Whispered with a tenderness he had never used for her. Amara's heart stopped beating. Her lungs forgot their purpose. The ceiling above her blurred as tears she refused to release burned behind her eyes. His hand rested against her hip. The same hand that wore the serpent tattoo coiled around his ring finger, the symbol of his family's legacy. The hand she had trusted. She turned her head slowly, carefully, the way prey moves when the predator sleeps nearby. Min-jae's face was peaceful, almost innocent in sleep. The sharp angles of his jaw softened. Those cold eyes that noticed everything, closed. Vulnerable. He whispered the name again. Zara. And this time his fingers tightened against Amara's skin. Longing. For her sister. The truth settled over her like a death sentence. He had never been the one. By sunrise the space beside him was cold. Her closet emptied. Her perfume bottles gone from the bathroom counter. Only a single pearl earring remained on the nightstand, the mate lost somewhere she would never return to find. Amara Okafor vanished from Seoul that morning. From Min-jae's world. From everything she had built. She left no note. Some goodbyes are too heavy for paper. Please like, share and subscribe. 3 years later. Busan, South Korea. The bell above the door chimed softly. Amara didn't look up from the damaged manuscript beneath her magnifying lamp. Her fingers, steady despite the tremor in her chest, continued applying the Japanese tissue paper to the torn page with practiced precision. "We're closed," she said in careful Korean. The words felt foreign even after 3 years. "Everything here did. The sign says otherwise." The voice stopped her breath. Controlled. Familiar in a way that made her bones ache. She knew that voice. Had heard it command boardrooms. Had heard it whisper against her throat in the dark. Had heard it say her sister's name when it should have been hers. Amara's hands stilled. She didn't turn around. The restoration workshop suddenly felt smaller. The cluttered shelves of antique books. The smell of aged paper and conservation adhesive. The single window overlooking the gray harbor. All of it shrank around the presence filling her doorway. "Your Korean has improved." She pressed her eyes closed. Just for a moment. Gathering the fragments of herself she'd spent 3 years rebuilding. "I asked you to leave. You asked me nothing." His footsteps crossed the worn wooden floor. Measured. Patient. "You simply disappeared." The accusation in his voice cut deeper than she expected. As if he had been the one abandoned. As if he had been left in an empty bed wondering what crime he'd committed. Amar finally turned. Kang Min-jae stood between a shelf of damaged Joseon-era texts and a restoration table covered in rice paper. He wore a black wool coat over a charcoal turtleneck. Simple. Expensive. The absence of obvious wealth somehow making his power more apparent. He looked the same. Sharper perhaps. The lines around his eyes deeper. But the same piercing coldness in his gaze. The same controlled stillness that made rooms feel airless. Her eyes dropped involuntarily to his neck. The coiled dragon tattoo crept above his collar, dark ink against pale skin. The legacy he could never escape. The family that had shaped him into this beautiful, dangerous man. She looked away quickly. "How did you find me?" "I never stopped looking." The words landed like stones in still water, rippling outward, disturbing everything she'd built to protect herself. "That's your problem," she said quietly. "Not mine." Amara. Her name in his mouth was unbearable. She had spent 3 years trying to forget how he said it. The way the syllables softened his sharp accent. The way it always sounded like something sacred and owned simultaneously. "Don't. Look at me." She refused. He waited. The clock on her wall ticked. 47 seconds. She counted each one. 47 chances to demand he leave. To call the authorities. To do anything except stand here trembling in the presence of a man who had destroyed her without even knowing it. On the 48th second she looked. His eyes caught hers. Held them. The same eyes that had watched her across crowded ballrooms in Lagos. that had studied her with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously invisible and completely seen. Something flickered in their depths. Something that might have been pain if Kang Min-jae were capable of such things. 3 years, he said. No explanation. No contact. You vanished like you never existed. That was the point. The point of what? His voice remained level, but his hands, those elegant, dangerous hands, had curled into fists at his sides. The serpent on his ring finger seemed to writhe with the tension. Punishing me for something you never gave me the chance to understand? Making me search every city you'd ever mentioned? Wondering if you were dead. I owed you nothing. You owed me the truth. The irony almost made her laugh. Almost. She turned back to her work. Picked up her bone folder with steady hands that betrayed nothing. Smoothed the tissue paper against the ancient page with practiced strokes. I think you should leave, Mr. Kong. The formality was deliberate. A wall made of syllables. He didn't move. She felt him watching her. Cataloging her changes the way he cataloged everything. The natural hair she now wore in long locks. The simple linen apron over her wool dress. The calluses on her fingers from years of delicate work. The absence of the pearl earrings she used to wear. You restored antiques in Lagos, he said. For your mother's gallery. Before. Oh. Such a small word to contain so much destruction. I restored art, she corrected without looking up. The books came later. When you ran. When I chose myself. Silence. She could feel his gaze on the back of her neck. On the small scar below her left ear she'd gotten falling as a child. On the tension she couldn't hide no matter how still she held herself. Have dinner with me. No. Amara. I said no. One dinner. One conversation. Then if you still want me gone I'll leave Busan. You'll never see me again. He almost believed him. The restoration lamp hummed above her. The rain had stopped outside, leaving the harbor draped in gray mist. A ship's horn sounded in the distance, low and mournful. Why now? Her voice came out smaller than she intended. 3 years and now you're here. Why? Because I finally found you. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. She set down her bone folder. Pressed her palms flat against the work table. The wood grain pressed into her skin, grounding her in the present when everything in her wanted to flee into the past or the future or anywhere but this moment. One dinner, she heard herself say. Not because you deserve it, but because I need to understand why you can't let go of someone you never actually wanted. When she turned, something in his expression shifted. The micro-movement of someone absorbing a blow they hadn't expected. Never wanted you, he repeated. The words came slowly, carefully, as if testing their truth. Is that what you believe? It's what I know. His jaw tightened. The dragon tattoo seemed to pulse against his throat. He took one step forward, just one, and the distance between them compressed into something unbearable. Then you know nothing. His voice dropped lower. Dangerous. And tomorrow night I'm going to prove it. He left without another word. The bell above the door timed his exit. Amara stood alone among her ancient books and half-restored manuscripts. Breathing. Trying to remember how. She had built this life from nothing. From the ashes of a heart she'd had to burn to survive. Every careful routine. Every quiet evening. Every intentional distance from the world she'd left behind. Now he was here. Now everything she'd built was already crumbling. She pressed her hand against her chest. Felt her heart racing beneath her palm. Remembered another time her heart had raced like this. So, she couldn't go there. Couldn't afford to remember. Especially now. Especially with him so close. Amara looked down at the ancient manuscript before her. A piece of someone else's history, damaged by time and circumstance. Reparable with patience and skill. Unlike her own. 4 years earlier. Lagos, Nigeria. The Okafor estate gleamed beneath the August sun. 300 guests filled the manicured gardens. Champagne towers caught the light. The who's who of Lagos society mingled with foreign investors, politicians, and old money families whose names had been carved into Nigerian history. Amara stood at the edge of the main pavilion, adjusting her mother's vintage pearls at her throat. Stop fidgeting. You look desperate. Zara appeared beside her in a cloud of expensive perfume and calculated beauty. At 24, Amara's younger sister had already mastered the art of making every word sound like a weapon wrapped in silk. I'm adjusting my necklace. You're nervous. Zara's lips curved. About the Korean. Amara's hands stilled. I don't know what you mean. Kang Min-jae. 36. Unmarried. Worth more than half the men here combined. Zara's eyes scanned the crowd with predatory precision. Father's been trying to secure a meeting with him for months. And tonight apparently he's finally agreed. For business. Of course. Zara's smile sharpened. Everything is business. Until it isn't. She glided away before Amara could respond, leaving behind the lingering sense that something important had just shifted. Amara watched her sister disappear into the crowd. Zara moved through the guests like water through rocks, finding every gap, filling every space, drawing every eye. They had been compared since childhood. Amara the quiet one. The artistic one. The one who preferred restoration workshops to ballrooms. And Zara the golden child. The social butterfly. The one who had inherited their mother's beauty and their father's ambition in perfect, devastating proportion. She's studying you. The voice came from her left. Accented. Unexpectedly close. Amara turned. The man stood in the shadows of the pavilion's edge. Wearing a black suit that probably cost more than her quarterly gallery earnings. His face was angular, almost severe. But his eyes saw too much. I'm sorry, she managed. Your sister. He nodded toward the crowd where Zara had stopped to charm a group of older investors. She's been watching you since I arrived. Calculating something. Amar's polite smile faltered. You're very observant. I have to be. He stepped out of the shadows. The movement revealed the edge of a tattoo creeping above his collar. Dark ink against pale skin. Something coiled. Something contained. Kang Min-jae. He didn't offer his hand. Didn't bow. Simply stated his name like a fact she should already know. Amara Okafor. I know. You know. Your father mentioned you. The daughter who runs the restoration wing of your mother's gallery. The one who prefers dead things to living ones. He says that like it's an insult. Is it? She held his gaze. Most people found it impossible. His eyes were cold, not cruel but removed. Observational. The eyes of someone who had learned to watch the world rather than participate in it. Old things survive because someone cared enough to preserve them, she said. Living things can still disappoint you. Something flickered across his face. So quickly she almost missed it. Interest perhaps. Or recognition. Your father wants to discuss a potential development project, he said. Luxury residential in Victoria Island. And you came all the way from Seoul to listen to a pitch? I came to Lagos for several reasons. His gaze held hers a moment too long. The pitch was convenient. Before she could parse his meaning, her father appeared. Chief Emeka Okafor commanded attention the way some men commanded armies, with the quiet certainty that refusal was impossible. Mr. Kong, I see you've met my eldest daughter. Amara, don't monopolize our guest. I'm sure he has many others to speak with. The dismissal was smooth, practiced, the way her father had always erased her from conversations that mattered. Actually, Min-jae said, his voice carrying a new edge, I was asking Ms. Okafor about her restoration work. I have a collection of Joseon-era texts that need expert attention. Her father's surprise lasted half a second. Then his sales instincts kicked in. Of course. Amara is very talented. We could certainly arrange. I'll arrange it directly with her. Min-jae's eyes never left hers. If she's interested. The question hung between them. Weighted with something heavier than professional curiosity. I'd need to see them first, Amara heard herself say. I don't commit to projects blindly. Her father stiffened at her directness. Min-jae almost smiled. I wouldn't expect you to. Later that night, Amara found herself on the garden terrace. The party continued inside, muffled laughter and clinking glasses creating a soundtrack she wanted no part of. The Lagos humidity wrapped around her like a second skin. The pearls at her throat felt heavier than before. You left. She didn't jump at Min-jae's voice. Some part of her had known he would follow. I needed air. You're hiding. That too. He moved to stand beside her at the terrace railing. Not touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat of him through the humidity. The city spread below them. Lights glittering off the lagoon. The distant sounds of Lagos nightlife. Car horns, music, the endless energy of a city that never truly slept. I've been to 47 countries, he said. I've attended functions in royal palaces and corporate headquarters. I've never seen anyone look more miserable at a party than you. I'm not miserable. You're not happy. Happiness is overrated. He turned his head to look at her. The shadows carved his features into something even sharper. Dangerous, almost. Who hurt you? The question sliced through her defenses before she could rebuild them. That's presumptuous. It's observant. He faced forward again. Someone taught you that your presence is an inconvenience. That your preferences matter less than your usefulness. You carry yourself like someone who's spent years making herself smaller. Her throat tightened. You don't know me. I know what I see. And what do you see? Someone pretending she doesn't want more. She should have walked away. Should have dismissed him with cold politeness and returned to the party to perform whatever daughter-shaped role her father required. Glad she stayed. They stood in silence as the night deepened. Not touching. Not speaking. Simply existing in the same space without the expectation of performance. It was the most comfortable she'd felt in years. The Josian texts arrived at the gallery 3 weeks later. Amara examined them with careful hands. For manuscripts each centuries old. Damaged but salvageable. The paper whispered beneath her fingers. Stories waiting to be preserved. Min-jae had included a note. 3 words in elegant handwriting. Take your time. She didn't understand why those words made her chest ache. 3 years and 8 months earlier. Lagos, Nigeria. The restoration took 6 months. Amar worked slowly. Deliberately. Each torn page required patience. Each faded character demanded precision. The work consumed her in the best possible way, hours disappearing into the meditative rhythm of preservation. Min-jae visited 3 times. The first visit was professional. He examined her progress with sharp eyes, asked technical questions about her methods, seemed satisfied with her answers. The second visit lasted 4 hours. They talked about the manuscripts themselves, the stories they contained, the monks who had copied them, the fires and floods and wars they had survived. The third visit he brought dinner. You haven't eaten, he said, setting bags on her work table. The restaurant names printed on them would have required 3-month reservations. Your assistant said you've been here since 6 a.m. I lose track of time. I know. He spread the containers across her desk. Fish and rice. Pickled vegetables. A soup that smelled like home even though his home was an ocean away. He watched him pour water into cups. His movements were economical. Precise. The tattoo on his wrist, she could see it clearly now, a serpent devouring its own tail, flexed as he twisted the bottle cap. Why do you keep coming here? She asked. His hands paused. Because you're the only person in this country who doesn't want something from me. I want you to pay for this restoration. That's a transaction. He met her eyes. Not a manipulation. The distinction shouldn't have mattered as much as it did. They ate in her workshop surrounded by ancient papers and modern preservation equipment. He told her about growing up in Seoul. About his grandfather who had collected these manuscripts. About the family expectations that had shaped him into someone even he didn't fully recognize. My father has plans, he said. His voice carried a new weight. Alliances he wants to secure. Mergers that require more than business agreements. Marriage alliances? Something like that. She forced her hands to remain steady around her cup. And what do you want? I used to think the question was irrelevant. Used to. His eyes found hers across the cluttered table. Things change. The night he kissed her, the monsoon had flooded half the city. Amara's gallery was on higher ground, untouched by the rising water. But the roads were impassable and Min-jae had been trapped there since afternoon. They worked side by side in her restoration room. She showed him how to handle the conservation tissue. How to assess the damage without causing more. How to read the faded characters by tilting the pages toward the light. His hands were surprisingly gentle. For a man known for ruthless business deals and calculated coldness, he held the ancient papers like they were living things. You love this, he observed. I love bringing things back. From destruction? From forgetting. She smoothed the final page into its protective folder. These manuscripts survived because someone cared enough to save them. Carry them. Hide them during invasions. Pass them to the next generation. That's what preservation is. An unbroken chain of people refusing to let something beautiful disappear. She didn't realize how close he'd moved until she looked up. His face was inches from hers. The harsh restoration lights softened his features, made him look younger, almost vulnerable. What if the thing that's beautiful is a person? His voice dropped lower. What if you want to preserve something that can leave? Her breath caught. Then you can't own it. You can only create reasons for it to stay. His hand rose slowly, telegraphing its movement, giving her time to retreat. His fingers brushed her cheek, the lightest touch. Question, not a demand. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. I've spent my entire life knowing exactly how everything would proceed. Every deal, every alliance, every choice made to serve a larger purpose. His thumb traced her jaw. I don't know what purpose this serves. And for the first time I don't care. Min-jae. Tell me to stop. He should have. Every rational part of her screamed the warning. He was a client. He was too powerful. He was already engaged probably to some carefully chosen Korean heiress. He was exactly the kind of man her father would approve of, which meant exactly the kind of man who would treat her as useful rather than cherished. But when she opened her mouth, the words that emerged were, I don't want you to stop. He kissed her like a man who had spent his entire life exercising control and had finally chosen to release it. Desperate but deliberate. Consuming but careful. His hands cupped her face with a tenderness that contradicted every rumor she'd heard about his coldness. The rain hammered the windows. The city drowned around them. And Amara let herself believe just for one moment that she could be someone's reason to stay. 3 years and 6 months earlier. Lagos and Seoul. They kept it secret. Not from shame, Amara told herself. From practicality. Min-jae's business negotiations with her father were delicate. If Chief Okafor knew his daughter was involved with his most important potential investor, he would try to leverage it. Turn her into a bargaining chip. Use her feelings as another item on his negotiation table. So they met in private. Late dinners in restaurants where the staff were paid for discretion. Long conversations on encrypted calls. Weekends when he flew to Lagos specifically to see her, staying in hotels she visited through service entrances. It should have felt degrading. It didn't. Because when they were alone, Min-jae transformed. The corporate shark disappeared, replaced by a man who remembered every detail she mentioned. Who sent her rare restoration tools without explanation. Who sat for hours watching her work, asking questions that proved he actually listened. My mother would hate you, he said once, tracing patterns on her back as the Lagos dawn crept through the curtains. Why? You're not Korean. Not from a family she approved of. Not controllable. His fingers paused. She spent her entire life ensuring I end up with someone who will obey the family's expectations. And what do you want? I want you to meet her. Amara turned in his arms. The serpent tattoo on his wrist pressed against her shoulder. A constant reminder of the world he came from. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything. Your family will never accept me. They don't have to accept you. They have to accept that my choice is made. Min-jae. Come to Seoul. His eyes held hers with an intensity that stole her breath. Not to meet my mother. Not yet. Just to see my world. To understand what I'm asking you to choose. He should have said no. He said yes. Seoul was overwhelming. The city pulsed with an energy Lagos shared but expressed differently. Neon lights and ancient temples. Corporate towers and night markets. Order and chaos intertwined so tightly you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Min-jae's apartment occupied the top 3 floors of a building in Gangnam. The elevator required a retinal scan. The windows were bulletproof. The art on the walls cost more than her gallery's yearly budget. It's a prison, he said, watching her examine the space. A very expensive prison. Then why stay? Because leaving would mean giving up everything I've built. Including me? He crossed the room. Took her hands in his. The serpent tattoo seemed darker against his pale skin in the apartment's ambient lighting. Including the power to protect the things I refused to lose. She didn't fully understand his meaning then. He would later. Zara arrived in Seoul 3 weeks into Amara's visit. Surprise. Her sister appeared in the lobby of Min-jae's building, draped in designer clothes and radiating mischief. Father sent me to finalize some documents for the Victoria Island deal. I thought I'd stay a few days, see the city. Aren't you excited? Amar was not excited. But she smiled and hugged her sister, and pretended the knot in her stomach was paranoia rather than premonition. I didn't know you were handling business now, Amara said as they ascended in the private elevator. Father's been training me. Zara examined her reflection in the mirrored walls. Someone has to carry on the legacy, since you chose to hide in your dusty workshop instead. The barb landed where it was aimed. My work is important. Your work is avoidance. Zara's eyes met hers in the reflection. But that's fine. More opportunities for the rest of us. The elevator opened into Min Jae's penthouse. He stood in the living room, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Korean. His suit jacket was discarded. The dragon tattoo on his neck was fully visible above his loosened collar. He ended the call when he saw them. Zara. His voice was carefully neutral. I wasn't informed you were coming. Last minute change. Zara's smile widened as she surveyed the apartment. Father wanted the documents hand-delivered. And I was so curious to see where my sister's been hiding. Something passed between Min Jae and Amara. A warning maybe. An acknowledgement that the careful boundaries they'd built were about to be tested. You're welcome to use one of the guest rooms, he said. But I have meetings tomorrow. Amara can show you the city. I'm sure she can. Zara's gaze lingered on his throat. On the exposed tip. On the intimacy implicit in rolled sleeves and loosened ties. I'm sure she knows all your secrets by now. The first crack appeared 2 days later. Amara returned from a gallery visit to find Zara and Min Jae in his study. The door was partially open. Their voices filtered through, quiet but intense. Understand what you're asking. Min Jae's voice was colder than Amara had ever heard it. I'm asking you to consider your options. Zara sounded perfectly composed. Amara is lovely. But she's not built for your world. She would suffocate here. And eventually you would resent her for it. You don't know what I would do. I know what men like you always do. Pause. Weighted with implications. You choose power. Every time. And she can't give you power. She can only give you comfort. Amara's hand trembled against the doorframe. While you could give me what exactly? Min Jae's voice dropped lower. More dangerous. Access. Father trusts me completely. Every deal, every secret, every hidden account. I know where all of it is buried. Marry Amara and you get a wife who hides in workshops. Marry me and you get an empire. Silence. Amara couldn't breathe. Then, get out. Min Jae. I said get out. Footsteps. The door swinging wider. Zara emerging with perfect composure despite the dismissal. Her eyes found Amara immediately. Something flickered across her sister's face. Satisfaction maybe. The knowledge that damage had been done regardless of outcome. Oh sis. Zara's voice dripped false sympathy. How long have you been standing there? That night Min Jae found her on the balcony. The city sprawled below them. Millions of lights against the darkness. A universe of people living lives that didn't know or care that Amara Okafor was falling apart. I told her to leave tomorrow, he said, standing beside her but not touching. Her business with your father doesn't require staying here. She was right. About what? I don't belong in your world. Amara kept her eyes on the skyline. I hide in workshops. I prefer dead things to living ones. I would suffocate here. Is that what you believe? It's what I know. His hand found hers on the railing. The serpent tattoo pressed against her wrist. Cold metal from his watch adding to the sensation. Then you know nothing. His voice was rough. Certain. I didn't bring you here to display you. I brought you here because this world means nothing without someone who sees past it. Past the money and the power and the carefully constructed fortress I've built to keep everyone at distance. She finally looked at him. His eyes held none of their usual coldness. Instead they burned with something she was afraid to name. Zara offered you everything I can't give you. Zara offered me a transaction. His grip tightened. I'm not interested in transactions. Not anymore. What are you interested in? You. He stepped closer. Close enough that his breath warmed her forehead. Just you. For as long as you'll let me have you. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him. But some wounds run deeper than words can reach. And Amara had been made small by her family for too long to trust that anyone could see her as enough. She's beautiful, Amara whispered. And ambitious. And she fits here in ways I never will. I don't want someone who fits. His free hand cupped her face. Tilted it toward his. I want someone who challenges every expectation I've ever had. Who makes me question everything I built my life around. Who looks at ancient papers with more love than most people show their own children. His thumb traced her cheekbone. I want you, Amara. I have wanted you since the moment I saw you standing apart from everyone at that party, looking like captivity in pearls. He kissed her then. Slower than the first time. More deliberate. A declaration rather than a discovery. And Amara let herself believe just a little bit longer that love could be enough. 3 years and 3 months earlier. So, Zara left the next morning. But her words stayed. Burrowed beneath Amara's skin like parasites. Feeding on every insecurity her family had cultivated since childhood. He can't give you power. He can only give you comfort. Amara watched Min-jae move through his world. Board meetings and investor calls. Family obligations that took him away for days. The constant pressure of expectations she could barely comprehend. He always came back to her. Late nights when he would find her reading in his study. Early mornings when he would bring her tea before his first call. Weekends when he would cancel everything just to walk through the city with her, showing her the soul he loved beneath the soul that owned him. But Zara's words kept whispering. Men like you always choose power. 3 months after Zara's visit, Min-jae took Amara to meet his mother. The Kong estate in Hanamdong was more fortress than home. Security checkpoints. Staff who moved like ghosts. Portraits of ancestors who seemed to judge every breath. Madame Kong received them in a parlor that probably cost more than Amara's childhood home. She was beautiful. The kind of beauty that came from generations of careful breeding and surgical enhancement. Her eyes held the same coldness as her son's, but without the warmth that sometimes broke through his. So, Madame Kong examined Amara with the interest one might show a curious specimen. You're the Nigerian. Mother, Min-jae started. I'm Amara Okafor. Amara kept her voice steady despite the trembling in her chest. And I'm honored to meet you. Are you? It wasn't a question. My son tells me you restore old papers for a living. I preserve historical documents, art, manuscripts that would otherwise be lost to time. And what does that pay? Mother. It's a fair question. Madame Kang's lips curved, a smile that held no warmth. If she's to be considered for this family, her prospects matter. She's not being considered. Min-jae's voice hardened. I've made my choice. Choices can be unmade. Not this one. The room's temperature seemed to drop. Mother and son faced each other with matching expressions of iron will. The dragon tattoo on Min-jae's neck pulsed as his jaw tightened. There are expectations, Madame Kong said carefully. Obligations that existed before either of us were born. This family's position doesn't come from love, Min-jae. It comes from strategic alliance. Then perhaps it's time to build a new position. You sound like your father. Something flickered across Min-jae's face. Pain. Old and deep. I'll take that as a compliment. His mother's expression shuddered. This meeting is over. She rose with the grace of someone who had never been told no. Miss Okafor. I hope you understand the position you're placing my son in. Every choice has consequences. And love is rarely strong enough to outlast them. She left without another word. Amara stood in the ornate parlor, surrounded by centuries of Kong family legacy, feeling smaller than she ever had in her father's house. I'm sorry. Min-jae's hand found the small of her back. She's right. Amara's voice cracked. She's right. I don't belong here. I'm not built for this world. I can't give you what you need. You give me exactly what I need. I give you problems. She stepped away from his touch. Your family disapproves. Your business associates probably talk behind your back. Your future is being compromised for someone who restores dusty papers in Lagos. Amara. How long before you resent me? She wrapped her arms around herself. How long before you look at me and see everything you sacrificed? How long before you whisper someone else's name in your sleep because some part of you knows you chose wrong? He crossed the distance between them in 2 steps. His hands gripped her shoulders, firm but not painful. Listen to me. His eyes blazed with an intensity that almost hurt. I have spent 36 years building walls. 36 years being exactly what everyone expected me to be. Controlled. Strategic. His grip loosened. His thumbs traced circles against her shoulders. Then I met a woman who hid at parties. Who looked at ancient papers with more tenderness than I'd ever seen. who made me question every choice that led me to the life I was living. His forehead pressed against hers. I don't resent you, Amara. I need you. In ways I don't fully understand and can't begin to articulate. You're not a sacrifice. You're the first choice I've ever made for myself. She wanted to believe him. She chose to believe him. For a little while longer. 3 years earlier. Seoul, the night that ended everything. The gala celebrating the Victoria Island deal was held at the Kong family's corporate headquarters. 400 guests. 3 floors of celebration. Champagne that cost more than cars. The kind of excessive display that Amara had grown up watching her father orchestrate. She wore a black gown Min-jae had commissioned from a Seoul designer. Simple but elegant. The pearls at her throat, her mother's pearls, the only jewelry she'd kept from home. Zara was there. Of course Zara was there. Her sister had returned to Seoul for the signing ceremony. Had spent the past week shadowing their father through meetings, proving her usefulness in ways Amara had never tried to match. You look beautiful, Zara said, appearing beside Amara at the bar. Very appropriate. Very understated. Thank you. Min-jae hasn't been able to stop watching you all night. Zara sipped her champagne. It's almost sweet. How obvious he is. Something in her tone made Amara's skin prickle. What do you want, Zara? Can't a sister compliment another sister? Not without an agenda. Zara laughed. You know me too well. She set down her glass. I wanted to apologize. For what I said in Seoul before. It was cruel. I was jealous, I think. You found something real while I was busy playing games. The words should have soothed. They didn't. Apology accepted. I also wanted to warn you. Zara's voice dropped lower. More serious. There's talk. Among the business people. About Min-jae's company and some irregularities. Connections to organizations that don't appear on any official records. What are you saying? I'm saying be careful, sis. Zara's eyes held something that might have been genuine concern. The Kong family's power doesn't just come from legitimate business. And once you're inside their world, getting out isn't easy. Before Amara could respond, Zara had vanished into the crowd. That night, after the gala, after the champagne and the speeches and the careful performances, Amara lay beside Min-jae in his bed. The city glittered through the windows. The penthouse was quiet. His breathing had steadied into the rhythm of sleep. Amara stared at the ceiling. Zara's words circled in her mind. Connections to organizations that don't appear on any official records. The way his mother had spoken about obligations existing before either of them were born. The fortress-like security. The staff who moved like ghosts. The tattoos that marked his skin like brands. What had she gotten herself into? What had she bound herself to? She turned to look at him. In sleep, the sharp angles of his face softened. The cold eyes were closed. The dragon on his neck seemed to sleep as well, still against his pale skin. He loved him. Despite everything. Despite the warnings and the doubts and the voices telling her she didn't belong. She loved this man who had seen her standing apart and chosen to stand with her. His lips moved. A word formed in the darkness. She leaned closer. Thinking he was dreaming. Thinking she might hear her name whispered with the tenderness he usually reserved for waking. The word came again. Clear now. Zara. Amara's world stopped. She must have misheard. Must have imagined it. The darkness playing tricks. Her paranoia creating ghosts from shadows. His hand moved against her hip. Longing. Zara. The name fell from his lips like a prayer. Her sister's name. Whispered in the bed they shared. Whispered with a tenderness he had never used for her. Everything Zara had said in that study months ago came flooding back. She's not built for your world. You would resent her. You choose power. Every time. Had she been right all along? Had Min-jae been using Amara to get close to the family while wanting the sister who could actually give him what he needed? The thoughts spiraled. Each one darker than the last. Each one confirming every insecurity she'd ever held. She lay frozen for hours. Listening to his breathing. Waiting for him to say it again. Hoping she'd imagined it. Praying she'd misheard. He said it twice more before dawn. Zara. By the time the first gray light crept through the windows, Amara had made her decision. She slid out of bed with excruciating care. Packed her things in silence. Took nothing he had given her except the memories she couldn't leave behind. The pearl earrings, her mother's earrings, she removed and set on the nightstand. One rolled away, disappearing into the darkness beneath the bed. She didn't search for it. Some things were meant to be lost. She wrote no note. Left no explanation. What was there to say? I heard you whisper my sister's name. I know what that means. I hope you'll be happy with the choice you really wanted. The words would only give him a chance to lie. And she couldn't bear to hear him lie. The elevator carried her down through 47 floors of luxury and heartbreak. The lobby was empty except for security guards who didn't question her departure. Outside, Seoul was waking. Gray dawn spreading across the sky. A world continuing to turn despite her destruction. Amara walked until she found a taxi. Gave the driver the airport address. Watched the city that was never hers disappear behind tinted windows. She didn't cry. Crying would require accepting that she'd lost something real. And if the past 6 months had been a lie, if she'd been a placeholder while he built a relationship with her sister, then there was nothing real to mourn. Just another lesson in choosing herself. Finally, after too many years of waiting for someone else to choose her first. Present day. The restaurant Minjae had chosen occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse overlooking the harbor. Private. Discreet. The kind of place where powerful men brought conversations they didn't want overheard. Amara arrived exactly on time. A small defiance, not early to show respect. Not late to show control. Exactly when she'd agreed. Because some battles were fought in minutes. He stood when she entered. The dragon tattoo caught the candlelight as he moved, dark ink visible above his collar even in a fresh suit. His eyes tracked her across the restaurant with the same intensity that had once made her feel seen. Now it just made her feel hunted. You came. I said I would. You said many things. Not all of them proved reliable. She let the barb land without flinching. Settled into the chair across from him without waiting for him to pull it out. You wanted one dinner. One conversation. She folded her hands on the table. So talk. You first. I don't have anything to say. Then explain why you left. The words hung between them. Demanding. Amara studied the man across from her. 3 years had changed him. Deepened the lines around his eyes. Added silver to his temples. Hardened something that was already hard. But those eyes. Those cold, observant eyes. They hadn't changed at all. You know why I left. I know nothing. His voice carried a new edge. I woke to an empty bed and a missing woman. Your phone disconnected. Your family refused to speak to me. You vanished like you never existed. Then you understand how little I meant to you. Excuse me. If I was so important, so irreplaceable, you would have found me years ago. Instead, it took 3 years for the great Kong Minjae to track down one woman. She tilted her head. Either I didn't matter as much as you claim or you weren't really looking. His jaw tightened. The tattoo on his neck seemed to pulse. I looked. Every day. Every resource I had. You know how difficult you made yourself to find. I wasn't hiding from you. You were hiding from everyone. Including yourself. The waiter appeared with wine neither of them had ordered. Poured it in silence. Disappeared just as quietly. Amara watched the red liquid settle in her glass. Blood dark. Beautiful. Why now? She asked again. Why finally find me after 3 years? Because someone else did first. Something cold settled in her stomach. What does that mean? It means your sister hired investigators 3 months ago. Looking for you. His eyes held hers with new urgency. She found this city. This address. She was planning to come herself until I intercepted the information. Zara. Looking for her. The cold spread deeper. Why would Zara be searching for me? I was hoping you could tell me. Minjae leaned forward. The candle between them cast shadows across his angular features. Because when I asked her directly, she panicked. Said things that didn't make sense. And then she disappeared too. Amara's hands trembled against the table. Zara's missing? For 2 weeks now. No contact. No trace. His voice dropped lower. More dangerous. And the last thing she said to me, Amara, the last thing before she vanished, was that she needed to tell you the truth before it was too late. The restaurant seemed to tilt. The harbor lights blurred through the windows. Everything solid becoming uncertain. What truth? That's what I need you to help me discover. Minjae reached across the table. His fingers stopped inches from hers, close enough to feel their heat but not touching. Whatever happened 3 years ago. Whatever made you leave. Whatever you think you know about me and your sister. It was a lie. All of it. His eyes burned with something she couldn't name. And somewhere in that lie, Amara, is the reason Zara is missing. The reason someone is manipulating both of us. The reason I haven't slept in 2 weeks because every lead ends in shadows. She should pull away. Should protect herself. Should remember that this man, this beautiful, dangerous man, had whispered her sister's name with longing while lying beside her. But Zara was missing. Her sister. Her complicated, calculating, infuriating sister. The girl who had tormented her and loved her in equal measure their entire lives. The woman who had tried to steal the only man Amara ever loved. Or had she? The doubt crept in like poison. Dissolving certainties she'd built her escape upon. I heard you. The words emerged before she could stop them. That night. You said her name. While you slept. While your hand was on my hip. You said Zara like she was the one you wanted. Minjae's expression shifted. Confusion. Then something darker. Realization. What exactly did I say? Her name. Twice. Maybe more. Amara's voice cracked. You said her name like a prayer. Like something you'd been holding back finally escaped. He was silent for a long moment. The restaurant continued around them. Soft music. Distant conversation. The clink of glasses. Then, Amara. Look at me. He didn't want to. Looking at him meant seeing the truth she wasn't ready for. But she looked. His eyes held something she'd never seen there before. Devastation. Absolute and consuming. That night. The night you left. I had received news earlier that evening. His voice was rough. Controlled. My security team had intercepted communications. Emails. Phone calls. Evidence that someone in your father's organization was passing information to my company's rivals. I don't understand what that has to do with. The evidence pointed to Zara. Amara's world tilted again. What? Your sister had been selling my family's secrets. Using access she gained through your father's deal to gather information and pass it to our competitors. His hand finally closed over hers, warm and anchoring. I was going to confront her the next morning. I spent that entire night working through the evidence. And her name. His eyes closed briefly. Her name was the last thing I read before I fell asleep. A document outlining her betrayal. A name I kept repeating because I was trying to understand how someone I was supposed to trust had been working against me the entire time. Amar couldn't breathe. 3 years. 3 years of believing he had wanted her sister. 3 years of grief and reconstruction and learning to live with a broken heart. And it had been a misunderstanding. A terrible, devastating misunderstanding. No. She shook her head. No. That's too convenient. It's the truth. His grip tightened. I wasn't dreaming about Zara Amara. I was dreaming about destroying her. About protecting my family from her betrayal. About how to handle the investigation without it touching you. Tears burned her eyes. He fought them back. Then why didn't you come after me? If I was wrong, why did you let me go? I tried. His voice cracked. The first break in his composure she'd ever witnessed. Do you know how many flights I took in the first month? How many investigators I hired? But you didn't want to be found. And eventually. His thumb traced circles against her knuckles. Eventually I convinced myself that maybe you left because you wanted to leave. That whatever we had wasn't enough to make you stay. That I had failed you somehow without even knowing what I'd done. The tears fell now. She couldn't stop them. 3 years. Wasted. Built on a lie she'd constructed herself. I should have asked, she whispered. I should have woken you. Should have demanded an explanation. But I was so certain. Because someone wanted you to be certain. His eyes sharpened. Someone who knew exactly how to make you doubt me. Who knew every insecurity you carried. Who understood that one well-placed whisper could destroy everything we'd built. The cold returned. Deeper than before. Zara. Maybe. Maybe not. Minjae released her hand. Sat back. The corporate strategist returning as the vulnerable man retreated. But whoever did this, whoever manipulated us both, they're connected to her disappearance. I'm certain of it. What do you need from me? Help me find her. His eyes held hers with deadly seriousness. Not for my sake, not even for hers, but because the people who did this are dangerous. And they know where you are now. They've known for 3 months, Amara. Since Zara's investigators found you. How do you know they're dangerous? Because of what happened when I started asking questions. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a photograph, slid it across the table. Amara looked down. Her restoration workshop. Her shelves of antique books. Her window overlooking the harbor. Photographed from across the street. Recently. The date stamp showed 2 weeks ago. Someone's been watching you, Min-jae said. Before I even knew where you were. They've been watching and waiting. For what? That's what we need to find out. He took back the photograph. Before they stop watching. And start acting. The restaurant suddenly felt unsafe. The harbor view menacing. Every shadow a potential threat. Come back to Seoul with me. Min-jae's voice dropped lower. Urgent. Just until we understand what's happening. I have security. Resources. Ways to protect you that you don't have here. You're asking me to trust you. I'm asking you to survive. She looked at this man who had haunted her dreams for 3 years. Who she had loved and lost and built walls against. Who she had blamed for a crime he apparently hadn't committed. The dragon on his neck watched her. Patient. Waiting. One condition, she finally said. Name it. When we find Zara, when we learn the truth, you tell me everything. No matter how bad it is. No matter what it reveals about my family or yours. Complete honesty. Done. And when this is over. When it's all resolved. She met his eyes with every ounce of steel she possessed. You let me go. If that's what I choose. No arguments. No pursuit. You let me disappear again and you never look for me. The pain that crossed his face was genuine. She couldn't doubt it. If that's what you truly want, he said slowly, then yes. You have my word. She studied his face. Searched for the lie. Found nothing but devastating sincerity. Then I'll come. The flight to Seoul departed at midnight. Amara sat in the private jet's leather seat, watching Busan's lights shrink beneath them. The harbor she'd walked every morning. The workshop where she'd rebuilt herself page by page. The quiet life she'd constructed from the ashes of everything she'd lost. Disappearing again. But differently this time. Moving toward danger instead of away from it. Min-jae sat across from her. Silent. Working through documents on a tablet. Giving her space even as his presence filled the small cabin. The serpent on his wrist caught the cabin lights as his fingers moved across the screen. She remembered tracing that tattoo in the dark. Asking what it meant. Family, he'd said. Loyalty. Sacrifice. The things we're bound by whether we choose them or not. There's something else, he said quietly, not looking up. Something I need to tell you before we land. More secrets. 1. He set down the tablet. Met her eyes. When I confronted Zara 3 years ago, after you left, she denied everything. Said the evidence was fabricated. That someone was framing her. Did you believe her? I didn't know what to believe. But I had her investigated anyway. Quietly. Thoroughly. His jaw tightened. The investigation revealed something I never expected. What? Your sister wasn't selling my family's secrets, Amara. His voice was heavy with implications. She was trying to protect them. The cabin seemed to shrink around her. I don't understand. Neither did I. Until 2 weeks ago. Until she disappeared and I started re-examining everything. He leaned forward. The dragon on his neck emerged fully above his collar, dark and coiled and ominous. Your sister discovered a plot against my family. Someone inside your father's organization was working with our rivals. But instead of going to me directly, instead of trusting me, she decided to handle it herself. Why wouldn't she tell you? Because the evidence pointed to someone close to both of us. His eyes held hers with devastating weight. Someone who had access to your family's business and mine. Someone who would benefit from destroying both. Who? That's what Zara was trying to discover when she disappeared. He paused. Let the words settle. And whoever it is, Amara, they know you're the key to finding her. That's why they've been watching you. That's why they waited until now to make their move. I'm bait. Your leverage. His voice hardened. But I won't let them use you. Not again. Not ever. The plane climbed higher. Seoul's lights appeared on the horizon. A city of 17 million people. A city where her sister was trapped. A city where the man she'd loved was somehow both her protection and her danger. A city where someone was waiting for her return. Amara looked at Min-jae. At the tattoos that marked his skin. At the walls she could see rebuilding behind his eyes. At the history between them. twisted and painful and unresolved. 3 years ago I ran because I thought you didn't love me. And now I'm running toward you. Because maybe that's the only way to learn the truth. His hand reached across the space between them. Not touching. Just offering. We'll find her, he said. And we'll find whoever did this. Together. She didn't take his hand. Not yet. Some distances couldn't be closed with a single gesture. But she didn't pull away either. And in the dark above the clouds, with Seoul's lights growing brighter, that felt like enough. The jet touched down at 3 a.m. A convoy waited on the tarmac. Black SUVs. Armed security. The machinery of power that Min-jae wore like a second skin. Amara stepped into the Seoul night. The air was colder than Busan. Sharper. The lights of the city cast the sky in artificial amber. She was back. 3 years of running and she was exactly where she'd started. Min-jae appeared beside her. His coat brushed against her arm as he guided her toward the waiting vehicles. The dragon on his neck disappeared beneath his collar as he straightened his posture. The corporate mask returning now that they were in his territory. There's something else you should know, he said quietly, his voice pitched for her ears alone. More. The last. He stopped walking. Turned to face her fully. The Seoul wind whipped between them, carrying the smell of exhaust and rain. My family knows you're coming. My mother. My uncles. The entire network. And they're not happy. They're suspicious. His eyes searched her face. They believe you left me to sabotage the Victoria Island deal. That your disappearance was strategic. That your return is equally calculated. You didn't correct them? I told them the truth. They chose not to believe it. And Zara? Do they know she's missing? They know. His jaw tightened. They're the ones who believe her disappearance is connected to you. The implications settled over her like chains. They think I did something to my own sister. They think you know more than you've said. That you've been hiding for 3 years because you're guilty of something. He stepped closer. Close enough that she could see the pulse in his throat. I don't believe that, Amara. But convincing them will require answers neither of us have yet. So I'm walking into a house that hates me. You're walking into my house. The possessiveness in his voice was unmistakable. And no one touches you without my permission. No one questions you without my presence. No one accuses you of anything unless they want to find out exactly how much power I'm willing to burn to protect you. The declaration should have been terrifying. It was terrifying. But it was also the most protected she'd felt in 3 years. Why? She asked quietly. Why go to war with your own family for me? Because I already lost you once to assumptions and silence. I won't lose you again. His hand rose, hovering near her cheek but not touching. Always that careful restraint. Whatever happens inside those walls, remember that. You are not alone, Amara. Not anymore. He turned and walked toward the convoy. After a moment she followed. The Kong compound had grown since she'd last seen it. 3 new wings. Enhanced security. The gates now required biometric confirmation from 6 different points. It had transformed from a family estate into something closer to a military installation. Min-jae led her through corridors she half remembered. Past staff who watched her with barely concealed suspicion. Past portraits of ancestors who seemed to judge each step she took. The room he brought her to was in the main residence's east wing. Large. Luxurious. A prison with silk sheets. You'll stay here, he said, opening the door to reveal a space that probably cost more monthly than her Busan rent yearly. The security team has orders to protect you. Staff will bring anything you need. I'm not a guest. No. He met her eyes with devastating honesty. You're the woman I love in a house full of people who want to believe you're my enemy. Treat every kindness with suspicion and every question as a weapon. And you? I have to meet with the family council. They've called an emergency session. His hand tightened on the doorframe. The serpent tattoo coiled with the tension. Stay here. Don't wander. And don't trust anyone until I return. Including you? He was silent for a long moment. The distance between them felt infinite despite their proximity. Trust me when I tell you this, I have never stopped loving you. Not for a single moment in 3 years. His voice dropped lower. Rougher. And whoever took your sister, whoever orchestrated our separation, will answer for every wound they've caused. That is the only promise I can give you tonight. He left without another word. The door clicked shut behind him. Amara stood alone in the silent room. Surrounded by luxury. Surrounded by danger. Surrounded by questions without answers. She walked to the window. Souls spread below her, a galaxy of artificial stars. Somewhere in that city her sister was trapped. Somewhere in this house, enemies were gathering. And somewhere in the space between truth and lies, the man she'd spent 3 years trying to forget was fighting for something she didn't understand. She pressed her hand against the cold glass. What happened to you, Zara? What truth were you trying to tell me? And what will it cost to finally hear it? The knock came at 4 a.m. Amara had been sitting in the window seat, watching the city lights blur with exhaustion. Sleep was impossible. Not here. Not now. Not with everything uncertain. He crossed to the door. Opened it cautiously. A young woman stood in the hallway. Early 20s. Wearing staff clothing that seemed slightly too large for her frame. Miss Okafor. Her voice was barely a whisper. Her eyes darted down the hallway nervously. I was instructed to bring you this. She held out a small envelope. Plain. Unmarked. Amar took it slowly. Instructed by whom? The woman shook her head. Backed away. Please. Just read it. And then destroy it. Before anyone sees. She disappeared before Amar could respond. The envelope felt impossibly heavy. Amar closed the door. Locked it. Crossed to the bed where a single lamp provided enough light to read. Inside the envelope was a photograph and a folded paper. The photograph showed Zara. Recent. Her hair was the same style she'd worn in photos from last year. She stood in front of a building Amara didn't recognize. An industrial structure. Gray concrete. No windows. On the back of the photograph in handwriting Amara recognized immediately. They're not who you think they are. Neither am I. Find the cage. Trust only your eyes. Amara's hands shook. The folded paper contained something worse. A series of photographs. Surveillance images. Some from years ago. Some from weeks ago. All of them showing the same thing. Meeting with men in shadows. Exchanging documents. Entering buildings that looked nothing like corporate offices. And in the final image, clear and damning, Min Jae standing beside a man whose face Amara knew from news broadcasts. Park Sung-jin. The head of Seoul's most powerful criminal syndicate. Amara stared at the image. At the dragon on Min Jae's neck, visible even in the surveillance photograph. At his hand gripping Park's in what could only be described as partnership. They're not who you think they are. Zara's words echoed through her skull. Neither am I. The city lights outside her window seemed different now. Menacing. The beautiful man who had promised to protect her. What was he really protecting? And her sister missing for 2 weeks. Was she a victim? Or was she another kind of weapon entirely? Amara clutched the photographs against her chest. The room that had felt like a prison now felt like a trap. Every shadow held potential enemies. Every silence concealed potential lies. She had come to Seoul to find truth. Instead she'd found only more questions. And somewhere in the darkness of the Kong compound, surrounded by enemies and uncertain allies, Amara Okafor realized that the man she loved and the sister she'd lost might both be strangers. The only thing she could trust was her own eyes. And what her eyes had seen tonight changed everything. Amara has discovered photographic evidence suggesting Min Jae has secret connections to Seoul's criminal underworld. Her sister's cryptic message implies that nothing is what it seems, including Min Jae's declarations of love and protection. She is now trapped in the Kong compound, surrounded by people who may be enemies, holding evidence that could destroy everything she thought she knew. The man she came back for may be the very danger she should be running from. The photographs burned against Amara's chest like accusations. She didn't sleep. Couldn't close her eyes without seeing Min Jae's hand gripping Park Sung-jin's. Without hearing Zara's words echoing through her skull. They're not who you think they are. Dawn crept through the windows. Gray light washing over the luxury prison Min Jae had placed her in. The city below was waking. Seoul stretching into another day of 17 million lives continuing while hers unraveled. A knock at the door. Amara shoved the photographs beneath her mattress. Crossed the room on unsteady legs. Opened the door with hands she forced to remain still. Min Jae stood in the hallway. He looked exhausted. The sharp lines of his face were sharper still, carved deeper by whatever had happened in the family council meeting. His collar was loosened. The dragon tattoo fully visible against his pale throat. The same throat she had kissed in the dark. The same man photographed with criminals. You didn't sleep, he observed. Neither did you. The council meeting lasted until an hour ago. He stepped into the room without invitation. His presence filled the space, commanding even in exhaustion. They've agreed to assist in finding Zara. Reluctantly. How generous of them. He caught her tone. His eyes sharpened. Cataloging her the way he cataloged everything. Something's changed. Nothing's changed. You're lying. He moved closer. Close enough that she could smell him. Sandalwood and something darker. Last night you were cautious. This morning you're hostile. What happened? The photographs beneath her mattress felt like they were screaming. He should confront him. Should demand explanations. Should throw the evidence in his face and watch him try to lie his way out. But Zara's warnings stopped her. Trust only your eyes. Not her ears. Not his words. Only what she could see for herself. I'm tired, she said carefully. And I'm trapped in a house full of people who hate me. Hostility seems appropriate. He studied her for a long moment. The silence between them thickened with everything unspoken. The investigation team has a lead, he finally said. A building in the industrial district. Surveillance footage shows someone matching Zara's description entering 3 weeks ago. Find the cage. The words from Zara's note pulsed through her memory. What kind of building? Abandoned manufacturing facility. Owned by a shell company that traces back to, he paused. Something flickered across his face. To connections were still unraveling. Connections to whom? That's what we need to discover. He reached for her hand. Stopped inches away. Always that careful restraint. I want you to come with me. To see the building. In case there's something there that only you would recognize. Every instinct screamed warning. But Zara was in that building. Or had been. And the only way to find her was to walk deeper into whatever trap was being constructed. When do we leave? Within the hour. His eyes held hers with devastating intensity. And Amara, whatever happens today, whatever we discover, remember what I told you last night. That you never stopped loving me? That whoever did this will answer for it. His voice dropped lower. Dangerous. Every wound. Every lie. Every moment of suffering. I will make them pay. He left before she could respond. Amara waited until his footsteps faded. Then she retrieved the photographs from beneath the mattress. Studied them again in the growing daylight. Min-jae with Park Sung-jin. Min-jae entering buildings that looked like criminal headquarters. Min-jae wearing the face of the man she loved while living a life she knew nothing about. They're not who you think they are. But which version was the truth? The man who had searched for her for 3 years? Or the man photographed with Seoul's most dangerous criminal? She tucked the photographs into her coat. Evidence she couldn't afford to leave behind. Today she would find out. The industrial district sprawled along Seoul's eastern edge. Gray buildings stretched toward a gray sky. Smokestacks and warehouses and the skeletal remains of manufacturing dreams long abandoned. The convoy of black SUVs wound through streets that grew progressively emptier. Amara sat in the back of the lead vehicle. Min-jae beside her. The space between them felt like miles. She watched his reflection in the tinted window. The way his jaw tightened as they drove deeper into the district. The way his hand rested on his thigh, fingers curled but not quite fisted. The serpent on his wrist seemed to writhe with tension. This area, she said quietly. You know it. Everyone in Seoul knows it. That's not what I asked. His eyes met hers in the window's reflection. Held for a moment too long. My family has interests here. Historical ones. From before the area was abandoned. What kind of interests? The kind that built our fortune. He looked away. And the kind we don't discuss. The admission hung between them. Heavy with implications. The convoy stopped in front of a massive concrete structure. Windowless just like the photographs Zara had sent. Gray walls stained with decades of industrial grime. A rusted sign proclaimed it had once been a textile factory. The cage. The name made terrible sense now. Security team goes first, Min-jae said as they exited the vehicle. Stay close to me. Don't touch anything without gloves. Armed men flowed past them into the building. Professional. Silent. The machinery of violence that apparently came standard with Kong family resources. Amara followed Min-jae through the factory's main entrance. The smell hit her first. Industrial decay mixed with something else. Something organic. Something wrong. The interior was vast. Empty assembly lines stretched into shadows. Dust motes floated in the weak light filtering through holes in the ceiling. Their footsteps echoed against concrete floors. Clear, a security officer called from somewhere ahead. "But sir, you need to see this." They found the room at the back of the factory. It had been converted into something else. A living space maybe. Cot in the corner. Table with scattered papers. Photographs pinned to one wall. Dozens of them. Photographs of the Okafor family. Amara's breath caught. Her father at business meetings. Her mother at charity events. Herself at the Lagos gallery. Zara at parties and dinners in places Amara didn't recognize. Years of surveillance. Spanning back at least a decade. "Someone's been watching your family for a long time," Min-jae said quietly. He moved to the table. Began examining papers with gloved hands. Amara couldn't move. Couldn't look away from the photographs. There she was at 23. At 25. At 27, standing in Min-jae's Seoul penthouse. Visible through a window she hadn't known was being watched. Someone had documented her entire life. "Amara." Min-jae's voice carried new urgency. "Look at this." She forced herself to the table. The papers were records. Financial transactions. Meeting notes. A web of connections that made her head spin. But one document stood out. A photograph of her father. Chief Emeka Okafor. Shaking hands with a man she didn't recognize. Beneath it, handwritten notes in Zara's careful script. "The partnership began 1998. Before either of us was born. Father sold access to the Kong family in exchange for development contracts. We were always part of the deal." Amara's hands trembled. "What does this mean?" Min-jae was silent for too long. "It means your father has been working with elements inside my family for over 2 decades. Selling information. Facilitating connections." His voice was carefully controlled. "And it means your sister discovered what he was doing and tried to stop it." "Stop it how?" "By gathering evidence. By documenting every transaction. By building a case that could bring down both families if exposed." The room seemed to shrink around her. Her father. Her beloved, difficult, dismissive father. A traitor to his own family. A man who had sold his daughter's futures for business contracts. "She wasn't betraying you," Amara whispered. "Zara. 3 years ago. The evidence pointing to her. Was planted." Min-jae's jaw tightened. By someone who knew she was getting close to the truth. Someone who needed her silenced, and who used our relationship to do it. "By making me leave. By making you believe I wanted her instead of you." His eyes found hers. Dark with fury and grief. "They knew exactly how to break us apart, Amara. They studied your insecurities for years. Watched you grow up feeling second to your sister. And then they used that wound to destroy us." The photographs on the wall seemed to mock her. Years of surveillance. Years of manipulation. Everything she had believed. About herself, about Min-jae, about Zara. Constructed by someone else entirely. "Who?" Her voice cracked. "Who did this?" A sound from the doorway. They both turned. A woman stood in the entrance. Older. Elegant. Her face familiar from portraits Amara had walked past 100 times. Madame Kong. Min-jae's mother. "I think," Madame Kong said quietly, "it's time we had an honest conversation." The tension in the room shifted. Security officers reached for weapons. Min-jae stepped forward, positioning himself between Amara and his mother with protective precision. "What are you doing here?" His voice carried an edge she'd never heard before. Not anger. Something darker. Something that sounded like recognition. "Following you. As I've always followed you." Madame Kong moved into the room with the grace of someone who had never been told no. "Did you think I wouldn't notice when you brought her back? When you started asking questions about investigations I closed years ago? You closed them. Not a question. A confirmation. I protected this family." Her eyes swept the room. The photographs. The documents. The evidence of decades of conspiracy. "As I've always protected this family. Even from itself." Amara's mind raced. "They're not who you think they are." Zara's warning. Not about Min-jae. About his mother. "The evidence against Zara," Amara said slowly. 3 years ago. You planted it." Madame Kang's gaze settled on her. Possessing. The same eyes she had passed to her son, but without any of his hidden warmth. Your sister was becoming a problem. Her investigation threatened alliances that had taken decades to build. And you, a thin smile. You were making my son weak, soft, distracted from his responsibilities. So you destroyed us. Min-jae's voice was barely controlled. The dragon on his neck pulsed with his racing heartbeat. You let me believe Amara left because she didn't love me. You let her believe I wanted her sister. You took 3 years of our lives. I gave you 3 years to become the man this family needed. Madame Kang's composure didn't crack. Without distractions. Without weakness. Without a woman who would never understand what we truly are. What you truly are, Amara said, the pieces finally connecting. The criminal connections. The partnership with men like Park Sung-jin. That's not Min-jae's secret, it's yours. Silence. Madame Kang's expression flickered. The first crack in her armor. You understand nothing. I understand that you've been using your son's face for your crimes. Amara reached into her coat. Pulled out the photographs that had tormented her all night. Held them up. Surveillance photos showing Min-jae meeting with Park Sung-jin. Evidence designed to make me distrust him. Evidence you arranged. Min-jae's sharp intake of breath told her she'd found truth. You had those delivered to her room. His voice was deadly quiet. Last night, while I was in the council meeting you called. You wanted her to run again. I wanted her to see reality. Madame Kang's mask slipped further. You think you love her, Min-jae. But love is a luxury our family cannot afford. The partnerships I've built, the alliances I've maintained, they require sacrifice. Your grandfather understood that. Your father understood it until his weakness destroyed him. And you. My father didn't die of weakness. Min-jae stepped toward his mother. His voice dropped to something barely human. He died because you couldn't control him. Because he started questioning the same alliances I'm questioning now. The accusation landed like a physical blow. Amara saw Madame Kang flinch. Saw decades of secrets flicker behind those cold eyes. Your father, Madame Kang said carefully, made choices that endangered this entire family. I did what was necessary. You had him killed. The words hung in the air. Terrible. Final. Amara couldn't breathe. That is a dangerous accusation. Madame Kang's voice had gone soft. One that could destroy more than just our family. Where is Sarah? Amara stepped forward. Standing beside Min-jae. Refusing to be protected from truth. If you've been manipulating everything, if you're the one behind all of this, where is my sister? Your sister is exactly where she needs to be. Where? Safe. A terrible smile. For now. As long as certain conditions are met. What conditions? Min-jae ends this foolish investigation. Returns to his responsibilities. And you, those cold eyes settled on Amara. You disappear again. Permanently this time. Leave Korea. Leave my son. Never return. And if I refuse? Then your sister remains where she is. Indefinitely. Madame Kang straightened her coat. I've kept her comfortable. But comfort can be adjusted. The threat was clear. Amara looked at Min-jae. At the man she had loved and lost and found again. At the dragon on his neck that suddenly seemed less like a family legacy and more like a brand of ownership. He stood between his mother and the woman he loved. 25 years of conditioning. 39 years of expectation. A lifetime of being shaped into the perfect heir. Against 3 years of searching. 6 months of love. And the hope that something real had survived all the destruction. Min-jae. His mother's voice softened. Almost pleading. She is not worth what you will lose. The empire I've built. The power I'm offering you. She cannot comprehend what she's asking you to sacrifice. He was silent. Amara felt her heart cracking. This was the moment. The choice that would determine everything. The test of whether love could actually survive the weight of legacy and power. You're right, Min-jae finally said. Amara's breath stopped. She doesn't understand the empire you've built. The sacrifices you've made. The bodies you've buried to keep this family's power intact. He stepped toward his mother. Each movement deliberate. Predatory. But I do. His hand shot out. Gripped his mother's wrist. The serpent tattoo pressed against her skin as he held her immobile. I understand that my father questioned your alliances and died for it. I understand that you've used my face, my reputation, to cover your criminal partnerships. I understand that you manipulated the woman I love into leaving because you couldn't control her the way you control everyone else. His voice dropped lower. And I understand that you think I'm still the obedient son you raised to sacrifice everything for family legacy. He released her wrist. You're wrong. Madame Kang's composure finally shattered. Fear, real fear, flickered in her eyes. You don't know what you're doing. The partnerships I've built, they won't accept betrayal. You'll destroy everything. Good. Min-jae turned his back on his mother. Faced Amara with eyes that held nothing but certainty. Some empires deserve to burn. He extended his hand. An offering. A choice. The future. Amara took it. The next hours blurred into chaos. Min-jae's security team, loyal to him it turned out not to his mother, secured Madame Kong while they tore through her private files. Every document she'd hidden. Every secret she'd buried. The location of Zara emerged from a coded ledger. A private medical facility. 40 minutes outside Seoul. Owned by one of Madame Kang's shell companies. Where inconvenient people were kept comfortable and silent. The convoy drove through darkness. Amara sat in the back seat. Min-jae's hand wrapped around hers. Neither spoke. Words seemed inadequate for what they'd just survived. What they were about to face. The facility appeared on the horizon. White walls behind razor wire. Clinical and cold against the night sky. Whatever state she's in, Min-jae said quietly, we'll get her help. The best doctors. The best care. Whatever she needs. You don't have to. Yes. His grip tightened. I do. This is my family's damage. My responsibility. The gates opened at his command. Security swept the building. Cleared each floor. Until they reached a room on the 3rd level. The door opened. Zara sat in a chair by the window. Thin. Pale. But alive. Her eyes found Amara's immediately. You came. Of course I came. Amara crossed the room. Fell to her knees beside her sister. I got your message. The photographs. The warning. The photographs. Zara's laugh was weak. Bitter. I stole those from Madame Kang's files years ago. Been waiting for the right moment to use them. To make me doubt Min-jae? To make you question everything. Zara's hand found hers. Thin fingers squeezing with surprising strength. I knew if you came back, if you trusted him completely, she would use that against you. Against both of you. You needed to arrive suspicious. Ready to question. But the photos were misleading. He wasn't. The photos were real. Zara met her eyes with devastating honesty. Min-jae has met with Park Sung-jin. Has entered those buildings. Has done things that aren't clean. Amara's heart stuttered. But not for the reasons Madame Kong implied, Zara continued. He's been building alliances against his own family. Against his mother. For years. Long before he met you. She looked past Amara to where Min-jae stood in the doorway. Watching. Waiting. He's been trying to dismantle the empire from the inside. And I've been helping him. The truth emerged slowly. In the car back to Seoul. In the hours that followed. In conversations that stripped away every assumption Amara had carried for 3 years. Zara had discovered their father's partnership with Madame Kong during a routine audit of family finances. Documents that didn't add up. Payments to shell companies. A web of corruption stretching back to before either sister was born. She had confronted their father. Demanded answers. He had confessed everything. The Okafor family's rise hadn't come from Chief Emika's business acumen alone. It had come from selling access to the Kong family. Information. Connections. Opportunities that legitimate business couldn't provide. And the price? His daughters. He promised me to Madame Kang's network years before Min-jae and I even met, Zara explained. They sat in a private hospital room now. Zara receiving fluids and nutrition while she talked. I was supposed to be the connector. The beautiful daughter who would charm the right men, extract the right secrets, serve the right purposes. But you refused. I started gathering evidence instead. Building a case that could bring down both families. Zara's eyes closed. I didn't know Min-jae was doing the same thing. Not until 3 years ago. Not until he came to confront me about the supposed betrayal. When I left. When she made you leave. Zara's voice hardened. Madame Kong planted evidence against me. Made Min-jae believe I was selling his family's secrets. But when he confronted me, when he saw the actual files I'd gathered, he realized we were fighting the same enemy. So you've been working together. For 3 years. In secret. Through intermediaries. Building alliances with people inside the criminal networks who wanted out. Zara opened her eyes. Held Amara's gaze. Min-jae's meetings with Park Sung-jin? Park is dying. Cancer. He wants to burn his own empire before he goes. Min-jae offered him a way to do it, and take the Kong family's criminal partnerships down with him. Amara's mind reeled. Everything she'd believed. Every assumption. Every fear. Constructed on foundations of lies. But why didn't you tell me? The question emerged broken. 3 years, Zara. I thought you wanted him. I thought he wanted you. I built my entire understanding of what happened on that belief. Zara's expression crumpled. Because I did want him. The admission hit like a physical blow. Not the way you think, Zara added quickly. I was jealous of what you had. How easily he saw you. How completely he chose you. I wanted that, not him specifically but what you had. Tears slipped down her cheeks. And when Madame Kong approached me when she suggested we could work together to separate you, I considered it. For one terrible moment I actually considered helping her. But you didn't. I couldn't. Zara gripped her hand harder. You're my sister. My impossible artistic too good for this family sister. And watching you with him, watching someone finally see what I'd always seen, I couldn't destroy that. Even when I was jealous enough to want to. Amara's tears fell now too. Years of distance and misunderstanding dissolving in a sterile hospital room. The name, she whispered. That night. He said your name in his sleep. I know. Zara nodded. He told me. He'd spent hours that evening reviewing evidence I'd gathered. My name was all over the documents. The last thing he saw before falling asleep. And I assumed. You assumed what she wanted you to assume. Zara's voice hardened. Madame Kong knew exactly which wounds to target. She'd been studying you for years. Watching you feel overlooked. Never enough. And she used every insecurity to make you run. The manipulation was so complete. So perfect. Amara had never stood a chance. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate. For believing the worst. For running instead of asking. For 3 years of. Don't. Zara squeezed her hand. You survived. You protected yourself. And now you're here. That's what matters. The door opened. Min-jae stood in the entrance. His suit was wrinkled. The dragon on his neck visible above his loosened collar. Exhaustion carved lines in his angular face. But his eyes, when they found Amara's, held something she was only beginning to trust. Hope. Park Sung-jin just confirmed the alliance, he said quietly. Tomorrow we begin dismantling my mother's network. Every partnership. Every criminal connection. Every buried secret. And your family? The legitimate business survives. Reformed. Rebuilt. He moved into the room. Stood beside Amara's chair. His hand found her shoulder, a grounding weight. The empire my mother built on bodies and betrayal, that burns. Zara watched them with exhausted satisfaction. She'll fight you. She'll lose. His voice carried absolute certainty. I've been preparing for this moment for 7 years. Since I found evidence that my father's death wasn't an accident. Since I realized the family I was raised to serve was built on foundations I couldn't stomach. He looked down at Amara. I just never expected to have something worth fighting for beyond revenge. The next weeks blurred into controlled chaos. Madame Kong was transferred to a secure facility while investigations proceeded. Her network began collapsing as partners fled or flipped. Park Sung-jin's dying confession brought down 3 other criminal organizations. The media storm was relentless. Amara watched it from the penthouse she'd fled 3 years ago. The same windows. The same view. Everything different. Min-jae came and went. Meetings with prosecutors. Interviews with investigators. The systematic dismantling of his family's criminal legacy requiring his constant attention. But every night he returned to her. Not to touch. Not to presume. Just to exist in the same space. To remind them both that something real had survived the destruction. You could leave, he said one evening. They sat on opposite ends of his leather sofa. The city glittering beyond the windows. The distance between them carefully maintained. The immediate danger has passed. Your sister is recovering. There's nothing keeping you here. Is that what you want? It's what I'm offering. His eyes found hers across the space between them. Choice. Something neither of us has had enough of. She studied him in the ambient light. The sharp angles of his face. The dragon on his neck. Permanent mark of a family he was systematically destroying. The hands that had signed documents condemning his own mother resting carefully in his lap. "When did you know," she asked quietly, "that your mother was responsible for your father's death?" His expression flickered. The first crack in his careful composure. "I was 25. Found correspondence I wasn't meant to see. Evidence that my father had been asking questions. The same questions I'm asking now. And that the answers had gotten him killed. You've been planning this for 14 years. I've been surviving for 14 years. His voice roughened. Wearing the mask she expected. Building power she thought she controlled. Waiting for the right moment to tear everything down. And me? Was I part of the plan? You were the plan's destruction. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I had everything mapped. Every alliance. Every move. Years of careful positioning. And then I met a woman hiding at a party, and suddenly none of it mattered anymore. I complicated things. You made them worth fighting for. He leaned forward slightly. The space between them compressed. I had revenge. Purpose. A future built on destruction. You gave me something to build instead. Amara's breath caught. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Trust again. After everything. Neither do I. His honesty was devastating. But I've spent 14 years pretending to be someone I'm not. With you, he stopped. Struggled. Found the words. With you I never had to pretend. Even when I didn't deserve your trust you saw something real. Something I'd forgotten existed. And if I can't be what you need, if I'm still the woman who runs when things get hard, then I'll find you. His eyes held hers with absolute certainty. However long it takes. However far you go. I will find you and I will wait, and when you're ready, I'll be there. That sounds like obsession. It is obsession. He didn't flinch from the truth. You asked me once what I was interested in. The answer hasn't changed in 4 years. Just you. For as long as you'll let me have you. The city sparkled beyond the windows. 17 million lives continuing while two people sat on opposite ends of a sofa, trying to bridge 3 years of destruction. Amara made her choice. She moved across the space between them. Settled beside him with careful deliberation. Let her shoulder press against his. He went still. The kind of stillness that spoke of years of control barely maintained. I'm not ready for everything, she said quietly. Not yet. There's too much we haven't said. Too much trust we need to rebuild. I know. But I'm not running. She let her head rest against his shoulder. Not this time. Not anymore. His arm came around her slowly, giving her time to retreat. When she didn't, he pulled her closer. Held her against his chest like something precious and fragile, and finally found. 3 years, he murmured against her hair. I looked for you for 3 years. I know. I never stopped. I know. I'm not going to lose you again. His arms tightened. Whatever it takes. Whatever I have to become. I'm not letting go this time. She pressed closer. Let herself believe for the first time in 3 years that she was someone worth holding. 2 months later. Lagos, Nigeria. The Okafor estate looked smaller than Amara remembered. She stood at the gates with Zara beside her. Both sisters staring at the house that had shaped them and damaged them, in equal measure. He's inside, Zara said quietly. Waiting. How did he react? When you told him we were coming? He cried. Zara's voice held complicated emotions. First time I've ever seen him cry. Then he asked if you'd ever forgive him. Amara didn't know the answer. Chief Emeka Okafor had sold his daughters to a criminal network before they were born. Had built his empire on betrayals and secrets. Had stood by while his children were manipulated and damaged. But he was also the man who had taught her to read. Who had carried her on his shoulders at festivals. Who had named her Amara, Grace, because he'd wanted her life to be easier than his. People were complicated, broken, capable of love and harm in the same breath. She was only beginning to understand that. Let's go, she said. They walked through gates that had once felt like prison bars. Up the drive where they'd played as children. Through doors that held generations of family history. Their father waited in the parlor. He looked older. Smaller. The powerful Chief Okafor reduced by revelations he could no longer escape. His eyes, when they found Amara's, held a grief she'd never seen before. "My daughter." His voice cracked. "You came. I came. I don't deserve." He stopped. Struggled. Started again. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know that. What I did, what I allowed to happen, I can never make it right." "No. You can't." He flinched at her honesty. Amar moved into the room. Stood before the man who had shaped her and failed her in equal measure. "You sold us," she said quietly. "Before we could choose. Before we could protect ourselves. You decided our value could be measured in business contracts. I believed." He shook his head. "There are no excuses. I was greedy. Ambitious. Convinced that power mattered more than anything else. By the time I realized what I'd done, what I'd tied my family to, it was too late to escape. You could have warned us. I was afraid. Of what they would do. Of losing everything I'd built." His eyes glistened. "I was a coward, Amara. I protected my empire instead of my daughters. And I will carry that failure to my grave." Zara moved to stand beside her sister. United front. Shared wounds. "We're not here for your apology," Zara said. "We're here because you have information. About Madame Kang's network. About partners we haven't identified yet. About threats that might still exist. And because despite everything," Amara's voice softened slightly, "you're our father. And we're tired of running from the people who shaped us." Chief Emeka stared at his daughters. The women they'd become despite his failures. "Whatever you need," he said. "Whatever I know. It's yours. All of it." He spent the next 3 hours giving them everything. Names. Accounts. Connections they hadn't uncovered. The full scope of the network Madame Kang had built across 2 continents. By the end, Amara understood something she hadn't before. Her father wasn't the villain. He was another victim. Trapped in a web he'd helped weave but couldn't escape. Sacrificing pieces of his soul until there was almost nothing left. It didn't excuse what he'd done. But it made him human. That night, Amara walked through the gardens where she'd first met Minjae. The same pavilion. The same humidity. The same Lego stars hidden behind clouds. Everything different. Her phone buzzed. Minjae's name on the screen. "It's late," she answered. "I know. I couldn't sleep." His voice carried across an ocean. "How was it?" "Hard. Necessary. He's not what I thought he was. Few people are." She sat on the same stone bench where she'd hidden from parties as a teenager. Let the night air wrap around her. "I miss you." The admission came easier than she expected. His silence held weight. The kind of silence that communicated more than words. 3 more days, he finally said. "Then you're home." Home. She'd spent years trying to find that place. Running from cities and countries and memories. Searching for somewhere that felt like belonging. Turns out home wasn't a location. It was a voice on the other end of a phone. A hand in the dark. A man who had searched for 3 years and refused to stop. 3 more days, she agreed. "I'll be waiting." "I know. Amara." "Yes. I love you." The words came quietly. "Certainly. I should have said it before you left. Before you left 3 years ago. Before any of this. I should have said it every day since the moment I met you." Her eyes burned. "I love you too." The words felt like coming home. "I think I always did. Even when I was running. Even when I believed the worst. Some part of me never stopped. Then come back to me." His voice roughened. "Please. I'm coming. Promise. Promise." 3 days later. The penthouse door opened. Minjae stood in the entrance. Same sharp suit. Same angular face. Same cold eyes that somehow weren't cold anymore when they found hers. The dragon on his neck. The serpent on his wrist. The marks of a family he was still dismantling. But beneath all of it, beneath the power and the legacy and the years of careful control, was the man who had seen her standing apart at a party and chosen to stand with her. "You're here," he said. "I'm here." Neither moved. The space between them charged with everything unspoken. 3 years ago, Amara said quietly, "I left because I was afraid. Because I believed I wasn't enough. Because every wound my family had given me convinced me that love was always a prelude to abandonment. And now I'm terrified for completely different reasons." She stepped closer. Close enough to see the pulse in his throat. "Because I've never had something real before. Something worth protecting. And I don't know how to be someone who stays. His hand rose, cupped her face with devastating gentleness. You don't have to know how, he murmured. You just have to choose it. Every day. Every time the fear tells you to run. His thumb traced her cheekbone. And I'll be here, choosing you back. For as long as it takes. What if it takes forever? Then I have forever. She closed the distance between them. Kissed him with 3 years of grief and hope and hard-won wisdom. Tasted salt from tears she didn't realize she was crying. Felt his arms wrap around her like she was something precious and found and finally home. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. I want to do this properly, he said quietly. Not the way my family does things. Not with contracts and alliances and calculated advantages. What does properly look like? It looks like you choosing me because you want to. Not because you have to. Not because circumstances forced us together. His eyes held hers. I want to court you. Take you to dinner. Learn the woman you became during the 3 years we lost. Fall in love with you all over again in every way that matters. That sounds terrifyingly healthy. He almost smiled. I know. I'm as surprised as you are. She laughed. The first real laugh in longer than she could remember. The sound surprised them both, breaking through years of silence and grief. Okay, she said. Court me. Take me to dinner. Learn who I am. And then we'll see. One day at a time. One choice at a time. I can work with that. He kissed her again. Slower this time. A promise rather than a declaration. And Amara let herself believe, finally, completely, that she deserved to be chosen. 1 year later. So, the wedding was small. 50 guests. A private venue overlooking the Han River. Cherry blossoms drifting through the spring air like nature's confetti. Amara wore a gown that blended Nigerian and Korean traditions. Her mother's pearls at her throat, the ones she'd left behind 3 years ago, now returned and rest-wrung. Min-jae waited at the altar. The dragon on his neck visible above his collar. The serpent on his wrist glinting as he reached for her hand. Ready? He asked quietly. I've been ready for 4 years. Took us long enough. Some things are worth waiting for. Zara stood beside her as maid of honor. Healthy now. Healed. Building a life separate from the family legacy that had almost destroyed them all. Their father sat in the front row. Tears streaming down his face. A man still learning to be worthy of the forgiveness his daughters were slowly extending. Min-jae's family, the ones who had chosen him over his mother, filled the other side. A network of cousins and allies who had helped dismantle the empire and were now building something new in its place. The ceremony was simple. Vows spoken in both Korean and English. Promises of partnership rather than possession. A commitment to choosing each other, every day for as long as they both lived. When Min-jae kissed her, when the guests applauded and the cherry blossoms swirled around them, Amara felt something she'd spent her entire life searching for. Belonging. Not the kind that came from family obligation or cultural expectation. Not the kind that required shrinking herself to fit someone else's space. The kind that came from being seen. Fully. Completely. Without condition. Mrs. Kong, Min-jae murmured against her lips. That's Okafor Kong, she corrected. His almost smile became an actual smile. Rare. Precious. Reserved entirely for her. Okafor Kong, he agreed. My mistake. First of many, I'm sure. Undoubtedly. His arm wrapped around her waist. Pulled her closer. But I have a lifetime to make them up to you. That sounds like a threat. It's a promise. She laughed. Let him pull her into another kiss. Let the guests fade into background noise. 4 years ago she'd hidden at a party because she felt invisible. Now she stood in the center of a celebration, held by a man who had crossed oceans and burned empires to find her. Some stories end in tragedy. But theirs, built on misunderstanding and rebuilt on truth, ended exactly where it was always supposed to. Together. 3 years later. So, the restoration workshop occupied the 3rd floor of the building Min-jae had purchased for her. Not a gift, he'd insisted. An investment. Her expertise in historical document preservation had become renowned enough to justify the expense. She'd rolled her eyes at his excuse. Accepted it anyway. Now she sat at her work table, carefully applying Japanese tissue paper to a Joseon-era manuscript that had survived 3 centuries of history. The same patient work that had sustained her through the darkest years of her life. The door opened. Mama. A small body collided with her legs. 3-year-old Kwame, named for strength, for struggle, for survival, grinned up at her with his father's sharp features and her own soft eyes. Behind him, Minjae appeared in the doorway. Still wearing his corporate armor, tailored suit, controlled expression. But the coldness in his eyes had melted years ago. Now they held warmth, love, the unguarded emotion he reserved for his family. Someone escaped from the park, he said dryly. I run fast. Kwame announced proudly. You do. Amara lifted him onto her lap. Let his small hands examine her work with the same curiosity she'd had at his age. But we don't run away from Papa. He worries. Papa always worries. Papa has reason to worry, Minjae said, crossing the room. His hand found Amara's shoulder. Squeezed gently. You have a visitor. She looked up. Zara stood in the doorway. Beautiful and healthy and holding the hand of a man who looked at her like she contained the universe. Auntie Zara. Kwame launched himself at his aunt with the fearlessness of children who had never known anything but love. Zara caught him, laughed, spun him once before setting him down. We came to steal your parents for dinner, she said. If the restoration genius can tear herself away from her ancient papers. Amara looked at her work table. At the manuscript that could wait another day. At the family filling her workshop with noise and love and everything she'd spent years believing she didn't deserve. I think she can manage. Minjae's hand slid from her shoulder to her waist. Pulled her up from her chair. Held her against him with the same protective possession he'd shown since the beginning. Only now it felt like safety rather than control. Good, he murmured against her hair. Because I've made reservations. Of course you have. I like to plan. You like to control. Same thing. His lips brushed her temple. But I'm learning to let go. Slowly. Very slowly. Some things take time. She turned in his arms. Faced the man who had searched for 3 years and waited for 4 more. Who had burned his family's empire to protect her. Who had chosen love over power every single day since. Some things, she agreed, are worth waiting for. He kissed her forehead. Her cheek. The corner of her mouth. Worth everything, he corrected. And in the workshop surrounded by ancient papers and family noise and the evidence of a life rebuilt from ruins, Amara finally understood. Some stories begin with a whispered name in the dark. Some stories end with a love that survives everything. And theirs, improbable and complicated and hard one, was both.